Hello, everyone, and welcome to MOS Live. Today, you have joined us for a virtual planetarium all about the sky tonight. My name is Megan. I use the pronoun she, hers, and I'm going to be your moderator for this program. So I'll be keeping an eye out for all your great questions today in our Q&A box. And thank you to those of you that are joining from Facebook or YouTube, but please note that we are not able to see any questions that you post there. And for our friends in Zoom, we will be collecting the questions from the Q&A box below. So be sure to click on that and submit your questions that way. You can also include your name and age if you would like a shout out. And my last bit is that if you would like to see closed captions, you can press the closed caption button at the bottom of the screen in Zoom, and you'll be able to see them that way. So without further ado, I would like to invite our educator, Talia, onto our screen to introduce us to her and the night sky.
Hello, everybody. Like Megan said, my name is Talia. I also use she, her pronouns, and I am going to be your presenter today, telling you a little bit about some things you'll be able to see in the sky tonight. And to do this, I am going to use a program that is called Stellarium. Stellarium is a free open source program. So if you like what I'm doing here, you think it looks cool, you can go use this program yourself. It is free to use on the web or to download. And this is the sky the way it looks right now. You can see 2:33 p.m. from Boston, Massachusetts. Obviously, this landscape isn't Boston, but this is what the sky looks like. And you can see there are two visible objects here in our digital sky. The very, very bright thing is, of course, the sun. What do you think this dark thing is right here? This dark circle down here. Go and write in the Q&A what you think that is in the sky. And if at any time I ask a question and you're not sure what the answer is, you may always feel free to put question marks. That is a perfectly valid answer to say that you don't know.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm keeping an eye out in our Q&A box here. We have some folks thinking the moon, maybe Mercury, a couple other folks, Prisha and Tara thinking the moon, Zachary, age 8, thinking the moon, maybe Mars.
Exactly, that is in fact the moon. And if you were to go outside, I know I said this is what the sky looks like outside right now. If you were to run outside right now and try to look for the moon in this spot in the sky, you really wouldn't be able to see it. You can see it here in our digital program, but if you were to actually go out and look at the sky itself, there's two things that are going to make it very, very difficult to see this moon in the sky right now. First, what we're looking at here is the nighttime side of the moon. The side that is facing away from the sun. It is the side that's not really getting any sunlight. So it's not shining. It's really, really dark. So that makes it hard to see all on its own. And then it is also very close to the sun in the sky. The sun, of course, is very bright. Staring anywhere close to it is very difficult and it's not great for your eyesight. So I recommend not trying that. This is the phase of the moon that we call new moon. And this is when we are seeing, it's sort of the opposite of full moon. When we look at the full moon, we're seeing the whole daytime half of the moon. This time we're seeing the whole nighttime half of the moon. We call it new moon because this is when we consider the moon to be beginning a new orbit around the Earth. So this is sort of when the moon is starting in its next orbit around the Earth. And as it goes forward throughout this orbit, we're going to see it wax up to full and then wane back down to new over the course of about a month. That's actually where the word month comes from. It comes from the word moon. And if you're surprised to see the moon up during the daytime, well, it actually spends quite a bit of its time up in the daytime sky. This is the side of its orbit where it's on the same side as the Earth as the sun, and it appears in the daytime sky. In fact, for most of its orbit, at some point or another, it's sharing the sky with the sun. It's actually very common for the moon to be up at the same time as the sun. We don't tend to think of it that way because, as you can see, when it's up with the sun, it doesn't stick out as much, of course, because the sun is so bright, and we tend to be seeing less of the daytime side, more of the nighttime side. When we see it up at night, we're seeing more of the bright daytime side, and it's at night. It's dark other than the moon. So it's much more obvious, much easier to see, which is why we usually think of it as being up at night, even though it spends a lot of time in the daytime sky. But this program is called The Sky Tonight, so you're probably only so interested in what the sky looks like right now. So let's fast forward time. Let's get that sun to set. And of course, the sun is setting later and later these days. And in fact, what I'll do right now is I will change our landscape so that we don't have any of these big trees or buildings on the horizon. We just have an empty horizon. It's another thing you can do with this program. It's really great. And you can see the sun is setting about 5:40, a little after 5:40. It's going to be getting darker. And this is getting progressively later each day. So this is the time of year when the sun is setting later and later. We're getting longer and longer days. We're almost at 12 hours of sunlight. So I'll go ahead and pause. We're pausing it at about 7 o'clock. And of course, we have this beautiful clear sky that we can see here. Again, this is not necessarily the sky you're going to see if you are in Boston, where we've got lots of city lights. But if you're at a really dark site, this is kind of the sky you might see. You can see I'm looking towards the south here. You can see the red letter S here, S for south, SW for southwest, SE for southeast. And in the south, just after sunset, we have the bright winter sky. I know spring is about to start, but right after sunset, we still have the winter constellations visible. And the winter sky has a lot of bright stars in it, as you can see. Here in the program, they indicate brightness by making them a bit bigger. What that means is that if you went out and looked at them in the sky itself, they would look brighter. And this is also where some very familiar constellations can be found. For instance, this one right here, I bet at least some of you know what this one is. Go ahead and write in the Q&A if you know the name of this constellation or you think you do. And remember, you can always put question marks if you're not sure.
All right, so we do have some guesses coming through. Someone is thinking Orion. Oh, someone else, a couple other folks are thinking Orion, maybe the Big Dipper.
Yeah, so this is in fact the constellation Orion, and the way you can tell is those 3 stars right there, Orion's belt. Nowhere else in the sky do you see 3 stars of such apparently equal brightness lined up quite so evenly spaced in such quite almost a straight line. And of course, they're not actually the same brightness. They're not actually in a straight line. These are 3 stars of very different brightnesses, different distances away from the Earth. The 2 in the middle, for instance, are much closer to Earth than the 2 on the ends are much closer to Earth than the 1 in the middle. The one in the middle is also brighter. They happen to line up from our perspective here in our solar system to form this nice line of Orion's belt. But there is more to him than his waist. You have his belt. Above the belt, you have his 2 shoulders. And then in between his shoulders is his little tiny head. Below the belt here are his knees. Those 2 bright stars marking his knees. And in Greek and Roman mythology, I should point out that the constellations I'm going to be pointing out today tend to be the Greek and Roman ones. They are not the only set of constellations out there. There are thousands of sets of constellations from people all over the world because it was one of the most common things in the history of civilization for people to look up at the sky and make up shapes in the stars. But the ones we use as the official set of constellations tend to be the Greek and Roman ones, which are the ones I'm going to be pointing out today. So in Greek and Roman mythology, Orion was a hunter. If you're going to hunt, you need to have weapons coming off of this shoulder, faint and hard to see. So don't worry if you try to go out and find it and you can't see it. There is an arm holding a club or a sword, some sort of weapon. And then in his other hand, this curve of stars. Sometimes it's a shield, sometimes it's his bow, sometimes he's carrying something else in that hand. And then hanging down from his belt is his scabbard, because he does have a sword and you need to have somewhere to put it when you're not using it. So this is one of the constellations, it's a lot of people's favorite constellation, because as constellations go, this one kind of actually looks like what it's supposed to be. I say kind of, no constellation looks that much like what it's supposed to be. But here he is, Orion the Hunter. As he appears in the sky, here's what he's supposed to look like. The mighty hunter. And I like to think of this constellation as sort of being the anchor constellation for the winter sky. It's very, very prominent through the winter months. And then spring, of course, is right around the corner. Spring is when Orion and the winter sky starts to fade. But they will be visible for a little while longer. So I'll point out a few more of these winter constellations. And you can use Orion's belt as a handy pointer to find some of them. For instance, if you follow the direction the belt points up, you get to a V shape in the stars right there. This is part of this constellation, and it's anchored by this bright red star, Aldebaran. I'll go ahead and put those constellation lines up there. This is supposed to be a bull. Remember what I said about constellations not necessarily looking like what they're supposed to be? This is what I'm talking about. This is supposed to be a bull, not just, in fact, only half of a bull. So the V shape that Orion's belt points you to is the face and head of the bull. Coming up off the top of the head are the two very long horns, and then what there is of a body coming down and sort of in this direction. And only the front half of the bull is there. His name is Taurus. You might have heard of him. And the funny thing is, as awkward as this looks, as little as this looks like a bull to me, there's a very long association of this group of stars with being a bull. There is actually a cave painting in existence of this group of stars with the shape of a bull painted over it. So this group of stars actually has a very, very, very long association with being a bull, even though it really doesn't look very much like a bull at all. Now, hanging out near the bull, in the same patch of sky as the bull, is this other, you notice we have a few bright reddish objects in the sky. Two of these are stars. This one is not. This is the planet Mars. So we've got a few bright reddish objects in the sky, one of which is in fact a planet. So you've got, again, these two stars right here, they're reddish. This one is Betelgeuse, the shoulder of Orion, Aldebaran, the eye of the bull, and the third one is Mars, the planet Mars, the only planet that you're going to be able to see in the evening sky tonight if you want to go planet hunting. This is the only one we've got. It's right between the V shape of Taurus's face and this star cluster over here, which is called the Pleiades or the Seven Sisters. It's another fun thing to look for in the sky. Mars is right between them. And I love thinking about Mars these days because we have a brand new rover on the surface, the Perseverance rover, which is only landed a couple of weeks ago. It's still checking itself out, moving around, and it's very exciting. In a couple of weeks, it's going to drop its passenger off. It's actually carrying a little helicopter, which right now is attached to its belly. It's going to drop that little helicopter onto the surface, and that little helicopter, Ingenuity, is going to become the first object to fly through the air of another world. That's going to happen in a few weeks, and I'm very, very excited about it. So stay tuned to hear news for that. So that's a bunch of stuff that you can find by following Orion's belt upward. You can find Taurus the bull, you can find the Pleiades star cluster, and you can find the planet Mars. Before we see what else we can use Orion to find, Megan, have any questions come in that I should be paying attention to?
We did have one question come in from Rob in Florida, who was wondering, can you still see winter constellations from southern Florida, or are they below the horizon?
Actually, from southern Florida, which is, of course, I'm showing you the view as it would be farther to the north of you, showing you the view the way it would be in Boston, these constellations would definitely still be visible. They would be a little bit higher in the sky. Anything that we can see in the southern sky here in Boston, if the further south you go, the higher in the sky it's going to get. It's things in the northern sky that will appear lower. So yes, you can absolutely see constellations like Orion and Taurus. If you can see them in Boston, you will still be able to see them in Florida. They will in fact be a bit higher in the sky and therefore a little bit easier to see.
That is it for our questions for now.
Excellent. So we'll go on. We'll see what else we can use Orion to find, because it is a very handy guide point. You can follow it up to find Taurus the Bull. If you follow the belt down, you get to this extremely bright star right here. And this one has a name that will be familiar to any Harry Potter fans out there. This is the bright star Sirius. And the character Sirius Black in the Harry Potter books, he can turn into a large black dog. And it's not surprising because he is named after this star, which is also known as the Dog Star. Sirius the Dog Star, because it is the brightest star in a constellation called Canis Major. Canis Major means big dog. It's supposed to be Orion's loyal hunting dog. And it's kind of a dog shape. That's a bit fanciful. I'm impressed that, you know, they managed to get a dog shape out of that. But the dog is kind of hard to see. The easiest part of it to find is the bright star Sirius. In fact, Sirius is the brightest star that appears in Earth's sky after the sun, which makes Sirius pretty easy to spot on its own. You can still use Orion's belt to find it, but you can just look for the brightest star that you can see, and that will be the star Sirius, which is the dog star. Right after sunset, it will be dead in the south. So again, if you're watching for our viewers from Florida, it will be slightly higher in the sky. And that is Orion's loyal hunting dog, Canis Major, the big dog. And Sirius is not actually the only Harry Potter connection in this patch of sky. A lot of those characters are named after stars. For instance, one of Orion's shoulders over here is named Bellatrix, which was another character from those books. And in fact, interestingly, both of Orion's shoulders have had movie characters named after them, which is a little bit weird. Bellatrix, of course, for Bellatrix Lestrange from Harry Potter, and Betelgeuse or Beetlejuice. Have to go a little bit farther back in time for that movie. But we can actually use Betelgeuse to find another constellation in the sky as an anchor. In fact, we're going to make a triangle out of Betelgeuse, Sirius, and this bright star right here, Procyon. The three of them make an almost perfect triangle in the sky. And Procyon is actually the brightest star in Canis Minor, the little dog. You have a Canis Major, a big dog. You probably need a Canis Minor, a little dog. And that is what Procyon is. Procyon is the brightest star in Canis Minor. And remember when I said that constellations often don't look like what they're supposed to be? They don't get any more ridiculous than Canis Minor. The constellation is exactly 2 stars. That's supposed to be a dog. The only dog I see there is a hot dog, but there you go. It's Orion's loyal hunting puppy. So once you've done the triangle from Betelgeuse to Sirius to Procyon, once you've got Procyon, you're halfway there. There's only 2 stars in that constellation. And these guys make up the bulk of the winter sky. And you can see they are on the western half of the sky. They're setting. Their time is running out for the year. They'll be back once the cold weather returns. But we are moving on to spring, and that means the spring sky is starting to reign higher and higher and higher, including the king of spring. Orion is my anchor constellation for the winter sky. This constellation over here is my anchor for the spring sky. I'll go ahead and sort of point it out to you. It's this backwards question mark shape with this bright star here as sort of the point of the question mark, and then this triangle right here. These are the stars of the constellation. What do you, or who or what do you think that is supposed to be? Go ahead and put an answer in the Q&A. As you look at this group of stars, who or what do you think that is supposed to represent? What would you call it?
All right, we have a couple guesses out there. Someone is thinking Leo, another person thinking a lion, a horse, some question marks out there, which is great too.
Yeah, so I always like to think that I would call this constellation a mouse, personally. I think it looks like a mouse with this end being the nose, but of course that's not the front of the constellation. This is the front, and it is supposed to be Leo, the lion. with the bright star there that was the point of the question mark. That is his heart, the star Regulus. And he is the anchor constellation for spring. Just like Orion anchors winter, Leo anchors spring. As we go further and deeper into spring, Leo is going to get higher and higher in the sky each night at sunset. I'll go ahead and fast forward time so you can see him getting this, as this is both what's going to happen over the course of the night, and as we go over the course of the weeks, as the sun sets later and later, and as Earth makes its way around the sun, Leo is going to become very, very, very prominent in the springtime sky, which is always exciting for me to see, because usually by this point I'm sick of winter. And I fast forward to time for another reason as well. Another thing I'm very excited about, another constellation appearing sort of on the eastern horizon that is fully risen. I've fast forwarded time now to 10 o'clock, a constellation that has fully risen by 10 o'clock, one that I am very excited because I don't necessarily associate this one with spring. I associate it with the beginning of summer. And I know it's going to be like 30 degrees this weekend, so you might be wondering why I'm thinking about summer, but this constellation always makes me think of it. You can see this bright star that has risen over in the east. This is a star called Arcturus. And Arcturus is the brightest star in a constellation that I always like to call the Great Celestial Ice Cream Cone. If you can imagine that, again, Arcturus is the point of the cone. Here is the cone right here. And then there is a scoop of ice cream on top. Now, again, as you might imagine, this constellation is not actually called the Great Celestial Ice Cream Cone. What would you call this one? Let's go ahead and see what you would call this one.
I personally like the Great Celestial Ice Cream Cone.
Right? I think that's fun.
I don't know. We don't have any messages just yet of what other people might call it. Oh, someone's saying a scorpion. I can see that too. A walking arc. Interesting. We got kite, boots. Oh, some clever ideas out there.
And it's interesting that somebody said boots, because I think they were trying to come up with the actual name for this constellation, which is Bootes. And Bootes is supposed to be a herdsman, a bear herdsman specifically. That's totally a guy herding a bear around the sky, right? Yeah, that's definitely what you saw. I did promise you that these constellations looked nothing like what they were supposed to be. But I'm always super excited when Arcturus returns to the sky, because it is, for me, a sign of the beginning of summer. It's right now rising pretty late in the evening, or late at night. When we see it rising in the early evening, when it's visible in the sky right after sunset, that's when we're getting into the really warm months. So I always like to see its return to the sky in the east. It's sort of a promise of what is to come. Just like Leo rising higher and higher in the sky is also a promise that spring is about to start. So I've shown you some things you can see in the evening sky. I want to take a moment to run forward to just before sunrise. Let's say you are not like me. Whoops, too far. Let's say you are an early riser. I am not. I like to sleep a lot. So I am not an early riser, but let's say you are. If you get up before sunrise, which again is happening earlier and earlier, you can see a pretty awesome array of planets in the pre-dawn sky. We've got a great lineup. If you've got a totally clear eastern horizon, you can see 3 planets lined up. The first to rise is going to be the planet Saturn. Next rising, even brighter, will be Jupiter. And then last, faint, harder to see, and not preceding the sun by very much, will be Mercury. So if you've got a totally clear eastern horizon, you have a shot at being able to see all 3 of these, although Mercury can be notoriously difficult to find. So be a bit of a challenge to try and spot Mercury in the morning sky. But you can see they are not going to be visible in the sky for very long before the sun rises. So if you do want to spot them, you're going to have to go out in the 45 minutes or so before sunrise and try and spot them in the sky. But if you're feeling up to it, by all means, go ahead. This, by the way, is what I'm showing you is Saturday morning. If you go out Sunday morning, you are not going to have to go out quite as early, because this is your friendly neighborhood public service announcement reminding you that daylight savings time is this weekend, which means if you go out and want to see those planets before sunrise on Sunday, you don't have to go out at 5:30. You have to go out at 6:30. Sorry, this is what I meant to hit. Just hitting the wrong things. There we go, 6:30. So if you want to go out Sunday morning and look for those planets, you don't have to do it at 5:30. You have to do it at 6:30, which is a marginally more acceptable time to be up before sunrise. So I have talked an awful lot. I've shown you a whole lot. Megan, are there any questions that I should answer before we wrap up?
There were a couple questions that came through. I'll also mention that the person that said boots earlier definitely said boates, and it's just my lack of space knowledge of reading things. So well done, my friend out there. Some person was wondering if there was like a story associated with Orion, like how did Orion get into the sky?
Yeah, so most of these constellations have stories that go with them. And if I'm remembering correctly, Orion was a mighty hunter, and what he did to get into the sky, I think it's possible the goddess Artemis had a crush on him. And I know he irritated a lot of the gods. He irritated the goddess Hera, who sent Scorpius the scorpion and Cancer the crab to attack him. And that's actually why Orion and Scorpius are on opposite sides of the sky. It's because Orion is running from the scorpion. So if you can see Orion in the sky, you know that Scorpius isn't up. And if you can see Scorpius in the sky, you know Orion isn't up. I think ultimately in the story, Scorpius caught him, and after his death, Artemis put him in the sky. I'm not a Greek mythology expert though, so that could be incorrect.
Wow, such space drama. I didn't know that it was so intense. Yeah. I think we have time for one more question, and someone out there who may be joining from Italy or maybe has family or friends in Italy was wondering if all the stars that we've been talking about, are they visible in Milan, Italy as well?
Yeah, I think so. If I remember correctly, Italy actually is a similar, Italy is actually a similar latitude to Boston. So yes, it might be slightly higher up in the sky or slightly lower in the sky, but as long as you are on a similar latitude to Massachusetts, then you can see what we're talking about. It doesn't matter where in longitude you are, so how far east or west. What changes what you can see is how far north or south you are. So Florida, for example, is a little bit further south, and so these things are going to be in slightly different places in the sky. But Italy is actually on a similar latitude to New England, so they're going to be similar places in the sky. Again, they might be slightly higher or slightly lower, depending on if you're a little further north or a little further south. But yes, is the answer.
Very cool. All right. Well, we had a couple other questions in the chat, but unfortunately, we are out of time. So thank you so much, Talia, for sharing all of this with us today.
My pleasure.
All righty. So hopefully you enjoyed this program. I'm going to make this nice and full screen for you. And thanks for joining us. If you want to try this out yourself, you can actually use Stellarium. You see the website right on this little page here, stellarium.org. So feel free to give it a go. And if you'd like to join us for other MOS offerings, you can always visit our website, mos.org/mos@home. And if you enjoyed today's presentation, please visit engage.mos.org to support us with our MOS at Home efforts. So thank you all for joining us today, and enjoy the rest of your day. And hopefully we see you again soon. Bye, everyone.